Namaste. We are back again with perhaps the most requested session on ethics diagrams. Now, you all know the importance of diagrams. They help you save time, and especially in a paper like ethics that has been getting lengthier year on year, saving up to 1 minute per question is huge. जिनकी भी राइटिंग स्किल्स राइटिंग स्पीड उतनी ज्यादा डेवलप्ड नहीं है, यू गाइज हैव नो वे आउट. आप लोगों को तो डायग्राम्स में मास्टरी करनी ही पड़ेगी. सेकेंड, इट हेल्प्स क्रिएट मोर क्लैरिटी. अ लॉट ऑफ डायग्राम्स हेल्प यू सेव स्पेस एंड बेसिकली प्रेजेंट इंफॉर्मेशन जो सेंटेंसेस एंड पैराग्राफ्स में आप वैसे भी प्रेजेंट नहीं कर सकते थे. फाइनली, देर आर अ लॉट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस that have implicit demands, and diagrams become the best way to address these implicit demands, because these demands are not the core discussion that you have to have in your answer. They are implicit. You have to simply touch and go, and diagrams are the best way to do justice, right? What we have done is we have consolidated all the diagrams, all the frameworks that exist, and all you need to do is understand how they operate and how you have to incorporate them in your answers. In all, there are 18 frameworks, right? अच्छा, यहां पे एक बात नोट करने की है that these diagrams are not interchangeable. आप सेम इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए, सेम एंटिटीज के लिए आप वेन डायग्राम इस्तेमाल कर लें, आप पिरामिड इस्तेमाल कर लें, आप स्टैक्ड इस्तेमाल कर लें. दैट्स नॉट हाउ इट वर्क्स, राइट? यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट diagrams capture the relationship between the underlying entities, between the underlying data, right? अगर आप गलत diagrams बना रहे हैं, it simply means that you haven't understood the relationship, and you are bound to lose marks in that scenario. So we'll look at them one by one. Also, we have the notes, the PDFs prepared where all the detailed diagrams are there. आपके साथ ये भी शेयर हो जाएगी. फर्स्ट, try to understand the conceptual foundations behind these diagrams, right? Behind these frameworks. First, let's look at Venn diagrams. सब लोगों को Venn diagrams पता है, right? You have overlapping circles, and in the center there is this area, the overlapped area. Now, in Venn diagrams, if you don't know what the overlap area signifies, then probably the Venn diagram doesn't fit there. So it's very important that you have some idea about what the shaded region signifies, right? Venn diagrams हम कहाँ देखते हैं? Let's look at certain examples. Very commonly used, ethics, morality, or ethics laws, right? So these are actions that are ethical, these are actions that are legal, and the overlap has actions that are both ethical and legal. These are actions, non-overlap area here, these are actions that are legal but not ethical, these are actions that are ethical but not legal. अब इसमें एक और another addition that can happen is a box, and this area sort of becomes actions that are illegal and unethical, right? You see Venn diagrams here. Where else do you see Venn diagrams? Very important diagram on sustainability. You have these three circles. The center shaded area is sustainable development, sustainability, and you have environment, economic, eco, and social. Next, we come to the pyramid diagrams. Pyramid diagrams are very simple. You have a triangle where you have level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3. And some examples for pyramid diagrams would be governance, good governance, and ethical governance. So you have governance here, good governance here, and ethical governance here. As you can see that ethical governance is much harder to achieve, and it has a higher pedestal. So it's up there, right? And it tapers. So there is, it indicates that ethical governance may आपका कम वॉल्यूम है, इसका मतलब है कि it's more difficult and it's more rare, right? The Maslow's hierarchy is also a pyramid diagram where you have basic needs at the bottom, right? Safety needs after that, and then belongingness, love. At the peak, you have self-actualization, right? Again, fairly obvious. Now, pyramid diagrams are different from the stacked ones. In stacked circles and squares, you have level 1, level 2, level 3, where level 2 sort of subsumes level 1, right? And level 3 subsumes level 1 and level 2, right? In the pyramid diagram, that's not the scenario. You have levels one on top of the other, right? Let's come to hub and spoke model. Very simple. You have a central square and you have spokes radiating out of it, right? So this is the hub, these are the spokes. Where do you see this diagram in ethics? A lot of places. First, Nolan's 7 principles of public life, right? The 7 principles of public life you can demonstrate using hub and spoke model. Corporate social responsibility and the different categories around corporate social responsibility, that it's about ethics, long-term goals, resources, all of that, right? Hub and spoke fits very well there. Tree/categorization diagrams. They are similar to hub and spoke, but they have various levels, right? So a tree diagram or a categorization diagram would look something like this, where you have the main entity here and the different categories that correspond to the main entity, right? And few things to note, that these categories are sort of mutually exclusive. There is no overlap. Agar overlap hota, to probably we would have used some other diagram. Where do we see this in dimensions of ethics, in the different branches of ethics, right? So you have descriptive ethics, meta ethics, normative ethics, applied ethics, and various subcategories, right? So under normative ethics, you will have deontological, teleological, so on and so forth, right? Half sun diagrams, you have half sun and you have these pointers radiating out. So half sun diagrams are the kind of diagrams that have been popularized by top rankers, and essentially instead of writing a paragraph with bullet points, they use something like this, and this is the format used to address implicit demands in a lot of questions. Flowcharts/processes, simple. You have step 1, step 2, step 3, and you have these arrows, right? More often than not, you'll also have a feedback loop, right? Where do we see processes in ethics? If we look at the process of value formation or attitude formation, right? That's a process, right? ARC's 7-step model for citizen centricity. This is also sort of a process. You have step 1 is define services, step 2 is set standards, step 3 is develop capacity, perform, monitor, evaluate, and then continuous improvement, right? It's an important diagram that's there in the ARC reports. Next, we come to the IO model. The IO model is a specialized version of flowcharts. What happens in an IO model is that you have inputs to a system, right? There's some processing happening, some feedback, and then there is an output, right? In flowcharts, that wasn't the case. It was more about step one, step two, step three, step. IO model is more specialized in a sense that it is accepting certain inputs and it is giving an output, right? Where do we see an IO model? When we look at local governance, right? So the inputs would be the three Fs: funds, functions, functionaries. The process here would be better services leading to citizen satisfaction, and then greater participation would be sort of the feedback. And so it's an ongoing process, right? Again, at this point, I would like to pause and show you the PDF where all these diagrams are comprehensively drawn. So if we look at process diagrams, operant conditioning का हम लोगों ने example दिया है. Operant conditioning का simple सा idea है that you punish the attitudes that you want to suppress and reward the attitudes that you want to see more and more. The input-output model, when it comes to the input-output model in resolving ethical dilemmas, right? So you have all the inputs become information, then you negotiate, you try to consensualize, reflect, come back, negotiate. Finally, it goes to arbitration, right? So all these diagrams in detail are there in the PDF. The idea here is to quickly take you through the fundamentals, right? So in the timeline diagram, again, a specialized diagram for the flowchart where one axis is the time axis, right? So if you have to look at attitude development or value development through the life cycle approach, right? Then you will say something like, these are the values that are developed during childhood, during teenage, adulthood, and towards the end of your life, right? So that's the timeline approach. Comparison grids are also very popular. You have these axes, and let's say you'll have ethics here and legal here, right? Actions that fall in this quadrant are ethical and legal. Actions that fall in this quadrant are unethical and illegal, right? So it's sort of a better representation of the relationship between ethics and law than the Venn diagrams, right? Because it is addressing all the four combinations very explicitly, right? Ethics, ethical, legal, unethical, illegal, ethical, illegal, legal, unethical, right? All the four combinations are addressed in this diagram. We have already looked at stacked diagrams. Let's see where we encounter them in ethics. Very important. Sympathy, empathy, compassion, right? So this is sympathy, this is empathy, this is compassion, right? They are not distinct. There is overlap. You can't be empathetic without being sympathetic. That's the idea, right? Where else do we see this? Beliefs, values, attitudes. बिल्कुल सही बात है. You have beliefs, you have values, you have attitude, right? अब इनकी आपको definitions पता होनी चाहिए to understand why that relationship exists. Now let's come to cyclical diagrams. Cyclical diagrams are again a specialized version of the flowchart/process diagrams where an infinite loop kicks in, right? So you have the wheel of corruption here, right? It would be something like you have politicians who take money from the private sector, who take money from bureaucrats, and then give services to citizens who in turn have to pay money to executives and to the private sector, right, in services that they consume. Another important place where you see cyclical diagrams is when you describe the circular flow of economy, right? Then comes the triangular diagrams. Triangular model is simple. You have this tripartite relationship. Where do you see this? The ABC components of attitude, right? Affective, cognitive, behavioral. Next are the pillar diagrams. Pillar diagrams would be something like, you have pillar 1, pillar 2, pillar 3, and you have some entity resting on these pillars, right? That would be pillar diagrams. Again, very common. So you have civil services, features of civil services, where civil services are resting on ethos, ethics, equity, efficiency, right? The 4 E's. That's one. Where else do you see the pillar diagram? In the smart city framework. Smart city framework mein, the pillars are physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, value infrastructure, and then smart governance, right? So pillar diagrams are different from bar charts. Bar charts are normal graphs. In pillar diagrams, you have pillars and that sort of serve as the foundation, and there is an entity resting on top of those pillars, right? Then comes the ladder diagrams. Very interesting, right? It shows a gradual progression. You see this diagram very commonly used in e-governance, where we are trying to describe technical shift, right? This is low technical adoption. This is one step, one notch up. This is another notch up, right? Where two-way communication is happening. Again, another interesting diagrams are balance scale diagrams, where you have to sort of demonstrate that striking the balance is the need. Examples: profit and responsibility, right? If you are not responsible, then your profits can go up, but we don't want that. At the same time, we don't want the profits to be absolute zero, because then your organization won't exist, right? So there needs to be a balance between profitability and responsibility. Another example: law and emotions, right? So you are an IAS officer, and you have to, there is a woman who doesn't have the required documents, but she needs to avail the public distribution system, the PDS system. The law doesn't permit you, but your emotions are telling you to help the poor lady, right? In that scenario, it's about balance. Another interesting diagrams are the bridging the gap diagrams. So you have something like this is the current service, this is the expected service, and this is the gap, right? Where do you see this in ethics? Citizen satisfaction, right? The current service is here, the expected service is here, and you show something like e-governance that can help with help bridge this gap. and get to higher levels of citizen satisfaction, right? Similarly, you can talk about technology. So these are the kind of diagrams that are used a lot in conclusions, right? They become interesting in making your conclusions sound more fancy. Graphs, bar charts are more data driven, right? Now, we have discussed 18 frameworks and diagrams corresponding to these 18 frameworks. One thing that you need to note is that these diagrams are standard diagrams. They are not contextual. They sort of have a universal appeal. आप ये diagrams किसी को भी दिखाएंगे, it would be self-explanatory. आपको कुछ और बताने की जरूरत नहीं है, right? They are sort of universal truths. But there is another level that you need to aspire. Top rankers are able to use these frameworks and come up with diagrams in real time corresponding to specific questions, right? Let's go ahead and see how these diagrams are used by toppers. So I'll show you some copies that have been submitted in this season itself, right? See here. Corporate governance should not be limited to wealth creation but must extend to wealth distribution. Discuss how corporate governance. You can see that there's a diagram, people, profit, planet, and then there's the overlap that has been explicitly stated. Let's look at this. Corporate governance should not be limited to wealth creation but must extend. Same question, and you have the same diagram, people, profit, planet, right? So what does this tell you? ये दोनों लोग same diagram बना रहे हैं for the same question, right? What are the odds? So this should tell you that top rankers, toppers, they think alike, right? इन्होंने ये competency develop की है. इन्होंने उनके दिमाग में ये फॉर्मेट्स पहले से बैठे हुए हैं कि हमारे पास अगर कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस का क्वेश्चन आए तो हमें इस तरह का डायग्राम प्रेजेंट करना है, राइट? दे हैव वर्कड टुवर्ड्स डेवलपिंग दिस कॉम्पिटेंसी. दैट्स व्हाई यू सी द सेम डायग्राम in the same question, similar questions, right? You can see the half sun diagram here. The half sun diagram. True happiness arises not from pleasure or success, but from pursuit of goodness. So half sun में इन्होंने समझा दिया है कि true happiness will not be limited to pressure. उन्होंने समझाया कि क्या होता है successful people are not happy with life due to over competitiveness. Pleasure is momentary. हाफ सन के थ्रू बताया. Explain the relationship between aptitude, problem solving ability and responsiveness. Here you see aptitude, problem solving ability, responsiveness में के बीच के relationship and a flow diagram, a process diagram, right? So aptitude, skill to act, responsiveness, skill to problem solving, solve problem. इधर आ गया है रिस्पॉन्सिवनेस और प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग की रिलेशनशिप बताई है, राइट? सो सम इनोवेशन हैज गॉन इन. एनालाइज द रोल ऑफ इमोशनल इंटेलिजेंस, बिल्डिंग रेजिलियंस. यू हैव द हार्ट, द माइंड एंड द बैलेंस डायग्राम हियर, राइट? सो यू कैन सी दैट टॉपर्स, students who are in the range of 120, 130, they are able to innovate real time. They have certain frameworks set in their minds and उनको अगर similar kind of question मिलता है, उनको पता होता है कि मुझे ये diagram बनाना ही बनाना है, right? By the way, the emotional intelligence definition here is not a standard one. Daniel Goleman should have been quoted and 4 quadrants, 12 competencies की बात करनी चाहिए थी, right? So this is exactly where you guys need to be. राइट सबसे पहले फर्स्ट स्टेप इज आप अपने सारे स्टैंडर्ड डायग्राम्स प्रिपेयर कर लीजिए. देयर हैज टू बी नो कॉम्प्रोमाइज देयर. द नेक्स्ट स्टेप विच सॉर्ट ऑफ इज अ बिट मोर टाइम टेकिंग is imbibing these diagrams in your answers and coming up with new diagrams, fresh diagrams that give your answers a fresh appeal, right? जैसा हम लोगों ने देखा. Now let's come to the last part of this session, around incorrect diagrams or wrong diagrams, right? There are a lot of diagram PDFs being circulated here and there. And I would say they have these 4 or 5 different issues, right? The first one is diagrams that are not technically right. This is a diagram that you will come across many times: ethics, morals, values, and overlap. I think you should be avoiding this, right? Because ethics and morals are at the same level. They help you determine what is right and what's wrong, right? Values don't help you determine what's right and what's wrong. Values are honesty, integrity, impartiality, right? So it's things that you hold at a higher pedestal. So this diagram doesn't make too much sense. Then comes EQ, IQ, gets you hired, gets you promoted. No such thing, no relationship like that. Can be right in specific context. Exactly. So if you look at this diagram, you can see that ethical standards are shown to be always ahead of legal standards. That's not the case all the time, right? In certain specific scenarios, let's say you have a question that says that in a specific context, the legal standards are lagging, right? They are lagging behind, but our society has moved forward. Our ethical standards are much higher up. What do we need to do? In that specific question, this diagram would be valid, right? The bridging the gap diagram would be valid. But as a standalone diagram, it's not correct. Incomplete, open to interpretation, components of EI. You have a standard diagram for emotional intelligence, the Daniel Goleman model. You have 4 quadrants, and there are 12 competencies that are nested in those 4 quadrants, right? Beliefs plus emotions equal to values. It's not wrong, but it's a little vague. Core beliefs, where you are heavily invested in, where you are heavily emotionally invested in, become values, right? तो थोड़ा कच्चा सा है ये. Sympathy, empathy, compassion, we have already seen the stacked circles diagram, right? So this is not apt. Process of value inculcation, this sounds very basic, and we have seen more nuanced diagrams, right? So this is what diagrams are all about. You need to master them at 3 levels. First, get the frameworks right, understand the frameworks. Second, all the standard diagrams corresponding to these frameworks, you have to memorize them. There is no way out, no other way, right? Third is where you can start getting creative at the question level. Understand what the question is asking, where a specific diagram can be fit in, and try to be creative there, right?